Today's build is all about crowd control, clicking heads and ripping them to shreds. We are running the spear and musket today for some big headshot damage and stuns, so let's go. Hey there, this video is sponsored by my merch store. If you look down below, there should be a card there so you can check out my merch store. I've got tons of cool different merch and there is more coming, so please go check that out. Now let's get into the video. The focus for this build is to keep your distance and pick people off with the musket, and using the spear to stun enemies and players that get too close to you. The spear and the musket synergize well together because they both stack with dexterity, and using the spear's many stunning abilities, you can social distance yourself from those bad guys and keep clicking their heads with the musket. The musket is also the only hit scan weapon in the game, which means that wherever you click, the second you click, your shot will immediately land at that spot, pending lag, obviously, that may affect it. This build is primarily used for leveling and PvP. You could technically take this build into expeditions, though I wouldn't recommend it, as this is a highly single target focused build and expeditions are primarily a multi-target AoE focused environment. Let's get into the weapon masteries and start breaking down this build. We're going to focus on around the level 10 mark with our weapon masteries as always for these leveling builds. And we're going to start off with the musket, and the main ability for this is going to be Power Shot. Power Shot overloads the musket, causing you to deal extra weapon damage, and it was a great opener to start your fights with, especially as you level it up and you get the various perks that come with it. Next, we're also using Power Burn, which is again a similar kind of attack, except it applies a burn effect to the enemy, so it will deal consistent damage over a period of time, which is good to apply to the enemies, especially in PvP, so that when they're running away from you, you're still dealing a little bit of damage. Our last ability is going to be Trap, which will root enemies for 3 seconds in place and also cause rend once you have upgraded the ability as well. And you can even have 2 traps active if you get it all the way to the end. The musket has really good utility, even in the abilities we aren't using, like Sticky Bomb or Shooter Stance. They're both really valuable abilities, but I find that they're not flexible enough to land in every situation, whereas the options that we have gone with are more flexible because you still have the movement ability available to you, so you can keep moving around, trap people in place, and keep firing back at targets. I'll put up a progression path for you if you are looking out to max out this build, and then we'll get into the spear. And for the spear, our primary ability is going to be Javelin. So you throw your spear at the target, which will stagger them, and once you have upgraded it to get that first upgrade in Forceful Impact, it will cause them to knock down, and this is a fantastic ability in PvP and PvE to keep enemies away from you when they do get out of your traps. You can then stun them, keep them at a distance. Next, we're also using Sweep, which will sweep at the target's legs and trip them over, again knocking them down, and then you can upgrade this to cause a stab as well, so that you can finish them up with a stab. And the last ability is actually in the Impaler line, which is Vault Kick. This will lunge forward and kick them and also stun them for 1.5 seconds. All of our abilities here for the spear are based around stunning and crowd control and keeping enemies locked in place. That is because we're really using these as a utility to our musket, which is the primary damage dealer for this build. The spear is just to protect yourself if people do start getting too close. I'll flick up the progression path for the spear here, but for the most part, it's just maxing out your primary abilities as well as picking up a couple of passives along the way that also benefit you and increase your damage as you are attacking those bad guys. For your attributes, the key focus is on dexterity. You want to maximize this as soon as possible and level this out. I would recommend to put some points into constitution, however, just so that you can take a little bit of damage when you are leveling and if you are doing PvP, but the key focus is on dexterity. We are basically a glass cannon. Let's move on to your gear and armor, and I have chosen to go with light armor personally because I like the dodge roll animation cancel that you can do. This is really helpful in PvP to get away from enemies or close to them if you're trying to follow up with a spear, as well as when you're just kiting AI around so that you can stay a fair distance away from them and finish them off with your musket. For your sets, you want to focus on the Of the Ranger set, which is a dexterity based set, which will give you a major amount of dexterity, and Of the Brigade, which will give you dex and constitution. Both of them are valuable to pick up, and there's plenty of sets that give dexterity. As long as you're getting dexterity, that's the key thing to focus on. You could definitely go a medium armor, or probably wouldn't go heavy, but a medium armor balance, or even putting some medium armor into your set but still keeping at that light range, is something I would definitely look at. How to play this build as a whole: you want to open up combat by placing your musket trap down in front of you. Then you want to follow up with Power Shot, because if you have the First Blood passive, it will deal an extra 10% damage, and you can also put a gem in your musket that will increase this damage even further. So your initial shot is going to be a huge damage ability. By this time, they're probably heading towards you. They're going to land in your trap. You want to hit them with Powder Burn. Then you can get that damage over time sweet ability on them. And then if they get too close, you've got Javelin first to follow up with the spear to knock them in place, you've got sweep, and you've got vault kick to finish them off if they do get too close. If you do end up pulling too many enemies, you really just want to kite them around. You don't want to be face tanking anything with this build, even in any kind of combat scenario, because you are very much a glass cannon. You will take a lot of damage and die very quickly. You want to stay your distance away from enemies as much as possible, and that's where that dodge, roll, cancel really comes into benefit. In PvP, it is a little bit more chaotic, as players aren't really going to walk into your trap unless, you know, that you put it in a really good place. I am terrible for walking in traps, by the way, but the trap is a bit more situational. It's the same reason why I don't like sticky bomb, as it is so hard to land on targets, but you really want to be using powder shot and power shot as much as possible on the targets, especially powder shot, because most of the time targets aren't going to be at full health. You won't get the benefits from power shot, but then if you do hit them with powder burn, you will get the additional benefits of the damage over time effects that do come from it. And if you do get close to the enemy, you've got your spear to follow up with all of those CC abilities. If you can land a javelin on them and stun them in place and prevent them from rolling, it is a huge benefit to you, especially if you're PvPing with people, because they can then follow up on those attacks as well. And it's really just about landing your stuns and landing your shots and keeping your distance to the best of your ability. You don't want to get too close. This is a ranged build primarily with the spear to follow up on. As long as you can keep your distance and keep landing those musket shots, you should be fine. Don't try and push players in any scenario unless you are really confident you'll be able to take them out. And for build tips with this build, there is no health regen, so be careful with your health. Make sure you're camping often for resting. Carry potions with you so that you can pop them whenever you do need them for that extra health. You can also store your abilities in the musket to use later. You've got power shot. You can actually use that ability when you're way away from combat. Store that round into the musket. It will flash to indicate that there is an active ability active in there. It'll initiate the ability cooldown, so by the time you actually do use that shot, you should have the ability up again. In the same token, when you are about to reload, you want to make sure you trigger an ability before your reload animation starts, because you'll get a full second reload animation if you do trigger an ability during a reload animation, if that makes sense. So as soon as you shoot, pop the ability to trigger just one reload animation. You can also shoot your musket while you are prone, which is something you can't do with the bow, which is beneficial in PvP, because when you are prone, your nameplate doesn't actually show to other players. So if you're trying to get a bit sneaky about it and snipe people from a distance, it's not bad to prone so that you can stay away from the enemies. Also, don't forget to stock up on cartridges. You can buy them pretty comfortably from the trading post, especially the star metal ones, or you can craft them yourself at a workshop. You can make them yourself. If you are planning on leveling up engineering and using a musket build primarily, it's probably a good thing to do this just to save yourself a few extra gold on the auction house, as gold is like crazy hard to come by for some reason, but they are super cheap. Typically, you can buy the star metal ones for barely anything on the auction house. And if you're looking for more builds, especially ranged builds, check out my Blood Hunter video, which is a bow and rapier build for you guys to play around with. I've got more builds coming as I am about to hit the end game. We'll start getting into some end game builds as well, especially with some more tank videos that I'd like to make, because I love tanking in this game. It's a ton of fun. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you to you for watching this video. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.